Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. As you can tell, I have a totally different background and everything. And here's the deal. My new MacBook Pro lost its audio card. So I drug out my older MacBook, and its internal camera would not function. So I drug out my Lenovo laptop, which is, 45 years old or whatever. And it would take video, but I couldn't export it. Had absolutely no way to save it, like into documents, and then go to documents, and then go over to YouTube and what have you. It's just absolutely crazy, the technological problems that I'm having. So I come over here to my desktop, and I've done a little bit of live recording on YouTube before, but they changed up so many of their settings. It is currently 5:40 a.m. in my world. It took me 30 minutes. Now, you got to remember, I'm technologically challenged. But it took me about 30 minutes to kind of go through and figure out how to do this. And I'm just hoping that it works. My audio level sounded good. My video is, looking pretty good. And you'll just have to excuse anything in the background there. And I'm trying to talk a little bit softly because, like I said, it's 5:40. My wife is in the bedroom over there. She is not by any means at all a morning person. And she can hear a bug crawl across cotton. So I'm doing the very best that I can to go ahead and do. Now, yesterday's video didn't work because of the lack of audio, obviously. I had some people suggest on the channel, though, that for those of you who couldn't hear, you just read my lips. Hey, that's a great idea. Okay. Pardon me. A little bit of a health update because I gave that yesterday and didn't work out. Okay, on Monday I had all these scans, or I got the results of all of my scans, MRI, 2 MRAs. The carotid artery scan turned out real good. The MRI on this area where I've had the biopsy turned out real good. The MRI on my brain, such as they could find, showed, however, that I have a significant difference and less blood flow on this side of my head from this side. Now, obviously, that's kind of disconcerting. So here it is Wednesday. So they brought me back in on Tuesday and did an EEG. And we're waiting on the results of that. I go back September the 1st. In the meantime, you know what? I'm starting to feel better. I don't feel 100%. Have you ever felt what I call have a bubble off center? That everything's just not quite right. Well, that's still what is kind of going on with me. But let me say again how much I absolutely appreciate all of the wonderful comments, your prayers, your kind thoughts, and what have you. So I hope and I pray that you'll continue to do that. Like I said, I feel like I told my wife yesterday, because I've had 2 days in a row in which I certainly didn't feel like my normal self. I'm a type A personality, and I just go like a house of fire, as she says, most of the time. And so the last 2 days, I've actually been able to work until mid-afternoon, when I sort of kind of, start fading, but kind of part of the routine, so to speak. So that's the update. Now then, to get back to our discussion of the Olivet Discourse. On Monday, I shared with you the correlation between Matthew chapter 25:31, Joel 2 and 3, Isaiah 2 through 4, and Matthew chapter 25:31 in regard to the motif of the avenging of the martyrs. Now, let me say again, I'm perfectly aware of the fact that in Matthew chapter 25:31 and following, it does not specifically use the term avenging the martyrs. Doesn't matter. It uses the imagery of Jesus' followers being in prison. Well, that's persecution. And guess what? At the time of the coming of the Son of Man, in the judgment, they got to enter the kingdom prepared from the foundation of the earth or the world. And so just because we don't have a specific word, term, or phrase does not mean that the subject, the theme, the motif is not there. With that in mind, I have been sharing with you some text, Matthew 21, Matthew 22, Matthew 23, all of which discuss and present the idea of the vindication of the martyrs at the time of the judgment of Old Covenant Israel. And you know what? I had somebody the other day say, the term Old Covenant Israel is just not in the Bible. Well, there you go again. People who make that argument, ladies and gentlemen, are just simply desperately grasping at broken straws to try to hold on to their ideology and theology. We just have to be better at our hermeneutic. What book on hermeneutic would ever suggest that because a given word, term, or phrase is not in every single text, that the term, being absent, means that this text without that term cannot be the same as this text that uses that term? It's literally ridiculous. So anyway, with that in mind, I've shared with you some thoughts from Luke chapter 18. And technically it's chapter 17. Very, very quickly. Luke chapter 17, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven does not come with observation. Now, here's a little deal, ladies and gentlemen. This is incredible, and it's incredibly important. Jesus said, when the Pharisees asked when the kingdom is going to come, Jesus said, the kingdom does not come with observation. Well, guess what, folks? The kingdom and the resurrection comes at the same time. Matter of fact, the kingdom and the resurrection are a whole lot synonymous. Not perfectly, not in every precise single way, but, resurrection to eternal life in the kingdom. Hello. Resurrection into the presence of God, the kingdom, presence of God. And so we have to understand the synonymity of an awful lot of these words, terms, and phrases, and to be able to recognize that the one is equal to the other. And again, not in every precise way, perhaps. One may include more nuances, more tenets, more elements to give us a fuller insight into it that the other term does not use. But again, doesn't mean that they're different. It doesn't mean that they're separated in time, by so-called 2,000 years. Okay. So Jesus said the kingdom does not come with observation. But he talked about the revelation of the Son of Man. And he said, pray that your flight be not in the winter. Pray that you not be on the housetop. If any man is on the housetop, let him not come down. Get out of town. That is a prediction and a demand of urgency. For those who take Luke chapter 17, by the way, Steve Gregg does, in his book, Why Not AD 70, or Why Not Full Preterism, excuse me. For those who take that position, that demands that Jesus is talking about, if you're on the rooftop when Jesus comes, and folks, that's pretty clearly a first century Jewish historical context, because they built their houses with flat roofs. It's where they put their grains and their stored their goods. It's where they went to eat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How many of you spend a lot of time on your rooftop? I'm not talking about putting a roof on. No. Jesus is talking about ancient times in which people would be on their rooftops. And he says, when you see these things come to pass, you don't go down into the house and get your goods. And listen, this is not simply talking about don't be covetous. No, he says get out of town. Just like Lot's wife. Don't look back. And so then he said, but the Son of Man must be betrayed, crucified, and raised the third day. And then he said, the days are coming, speaking to his apostles, in which you will desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man. Now, over the last 20 or 30 years, a quote, brand new argument, as it were, there may have been others who have made the argument down through history, but I've not been aware of it, but that doesn't mean a whole lot. But who have said, well, what Jesus is saying here to his apostles is, days are coming in which you're going to desire to see my return, my second coming at the end of time, but you won't see it. Therefore, we are told, what this means is Jesus was saying his coming, the parousia, at the end of time, would not be in their lifetime. Well, that's pretty obviously not what he was talking about. He links his suffering, his crucifixion, his resurrection, in other words, his persecution, with that of his apostles. And the meaning of this passage should be very clear unless we have an a priori agenda to sustain. What Jesus was saying in light of the persecution that he was going to endure, and Jesus said, if they hate me, they're going to hate you. They persecute me, they're going to persecute you, John 15 and 16. So what Jesus was saying was, the time is coming in which, due to that coming persecution, you're going to desire the early days of my ministry. Well, what did that mean? The early days of Jesus's ministry were peaceful. There were times of popularity. There were times in which the throngs gathered to follow Jesus. No one threatened their life. No one was trying to kill them. And so Jesus is saying the time is coming in which you're going to desire to see those peaceful days of popularity again, but you won't. Why? Well, because they're going to chase you from city to city. They're going to persecute you. They're going to crucify you. They're going to, they're going to kill you. And so you're not going to see those peaceful days anymore. And thus, in chapter 18, he tells them, men ought always to pray. Now, is that just a generic, timeless statement? No, obviously, prayer is a continuing, abiding thing. But the prayer there is in light of the context of coming persecution, because he immediately says there was in a certain town a woman who's being, quote, persecuted, and there was a judge. And she kept going to the judge saying, avenge me on my adversary. But he wouldn't do it. She kept coming back. This parable is called the parable of the importunate widow, because she just kept coming back, kept coming back, kept coming back. Finally, the judge says, I don't fear God, I don't fear man. But because of this woman's continual coming to me, I will grant her her wish. And Jesus then says, will not God avenge the elect who cry out to him day and night? Yea, verily I say unto you. Now, here's something critical. That little term that is translated as verily I say unto you is from the Greek term amin lego humin. And it always calls attention to what is about to be said that is going to emphasize what he has just said. So the question is, will God not avenge his elect who cry out to him day and night? Yes, he will avenge them speedily. Verily I say to you, he will avenge them speedily. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that avenging of the martyrs is the avenging of the martyrs of Joel chapter 3:21. It's the avenging of the martyrs of Isaiah chapter 4 and verse 4. It's the avenging of the martyrs of Matthew chapter 21, of 22 and 23. If not, where's the proof of it? You see, I don't see any proof of any delineation in these discussions of the avenging of the martyrs. Well, when Jesus said he will avenge them speedily, that's from the Greek term entakai. And the futurists like to say, well, yeah, what Jesus meant there, he wasn't saying when the martyrs would be avenged. And in order to say that, they have to ignore Matthew 21, the parable of the wicked husbandman who killed the son, who killed the servants, and the Lord came and destroyed them. And the Pharisees and Sadducees understood he was talking about them being the object of that coming of the Lord. It has to ignore Matthew chapter 22, the servants being sent out to call those who had already been invited to the wedding feast, and they mistreated and killed the servants, and the Lord sent out his army and killed those wicked men and burned their city Well, I wonder what that was. And in order to divorce Luke chapter 18 from Matthew chapter 23, we have to show that it's different martyrs who had been crying out to the Lord day and night for who knows how long. Well, maybe from Genesis 4, the blood of Abel cries out to me from the ground. Hello. So in order to make Luke chapter 18 refer to an event beyond and different from the coming vindication of the martyrs in AD 70, a person has to be able to prove that Luke 18 is talking about a totally different set of martyrs, and they have to be able to prove that the Greek term entakai means rapidly but not soon. But here's a little homework assignment for you, okay? Go to Bible Gateway, look up Luke 18:6, he will avenge them speedily, and then look at every English translation. Now, unless I missed one, there's not a single English translation that renders it rapidly but not soon or anything even closely resembling that. Every English translation renders it as soon, quickly, shortly, or very soon, etc., etc. Now, look, folks, these translations are produced by people who believe that the coming of the Lord is still future, and yet their expertise in the Greek forced them not to translate it as rapidly versus soon. So what I'm saying here is that Luke chapter 18, once again, which is the vindication of the martyrs in fulfillment of Joel 3, Isaiah 2 through 4, Matthew 21, Matthew 22, Matthew 23, since Luke 18 is parallel with all those passages, and those passages are the source for Matthew 25, 31 and following, that means that the judgment of Matthew 25, 31 and following was to be fulfilled soon, quickly, shortly, very soon, as all translations render it, and it would be at the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. That means Matthew 25, 31 was fulfilled in AD 70. Okay, I'm out of time. I sure do hope this takes. And so thank you for joining me. Now I've got to go in and see if it did take and see if I can edit it a little bit and what have you. But again, thank you. I'll see you on the flip side.